I think it's looking good. There we are. Let go. Blue Nazu, hey Bea, hey Chidori. Okay. So, let's see. It's the next day, right? That's where we left off last time. Genji once again tightened his bow tie and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night. But it didn't look like the thick rain clouds were planning to let any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim and far from refreshing.
やはり今日いっぱいはやみそうにないか。
お待たせしました、源氏様。
Kanon finished checking his appearance and exited the washroom. In a normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to a morning shift. It was a special system for just the 2 days of the family conference. But then, as long as the typhoon didn't leave today, the relatives' stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Kanon thought that it was best to be prepared for the special schedule to be extended one more day. I have the feeling it's gonna be extended way more than that. But, yeah. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain last night. Eh? What are you talking about, Bea? Even though they had spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, it had only taken one stormy night to ruin it. Ah, the mackerel that you posted. Yes, yes, yes. I get you. I get you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hey, Zekto. How's it going? It was smoked, if I saw it correctly. Hey, hey, hey. Ah, there it is. Kanon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he would undoubtedly have been up for some time already, and now be in the middle of preparing a breakfast both exquisite and as elegant as glasswork. Oh wow. Interesting comparison there. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took from his pocket a bundle of several keys and used it to unlock the front door. There was nothing on Rokkenjima outside the Ushiromiya family mansion, so there never used to be a custom of locking up. Right here, somewhere. Am I pointing it right? I can't tell. I need to look at OBS. Wait a second. There he is. Hi, Clinton. However, Natsuhi had ordered that it be part of their duties to lock up the mansion from around midnight to early morning. I'll post a picture later. If I forget, please remind me. I'm likely to forget, but I will do my best to not. And unlocking in the early morning was to be done by the servants who had the morning shift. Since Goda would begin the preparations for breakfast as soon as he woke up, this task was to be undertaken by Genji and Kanon. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was still asleep.
では、朝の仕事を始めよう。
はい。
The two of them split up and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains remained closed, the inside of the mansion would be unable to shake off its gloom, as if it hadn't yet managed to escape the previous night. Kanon, following a well-versed procedure, went around the mansion, opening one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, by opening the curtains, it began to feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he hadn't yet smelled anything, his empty stomach started aching in anticipation of the scent of Goda's much bragged about cooking.
おはようございます。
Oh no. He tried to greet Goda, who he had thought would be preparing the meal inside the kitchen, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit, and never mind the curtains, the ventilation fan wasn't even spinning. It was still cold in the room, without a hint of a flame, and of course no preparations for breakfast were taking place. Although it must not be allowed to happen, maybe Goda had overslept. Servants are humans too. I'm scared. Where is this going? They can sometimes fail to wake up or something and be late as a result. In the rare case of that happening, it was the virtue of a servant to casually smooth the situation over so as not to cause an unsightly scene, and to make sure that their masters never even noticed that such a mistake happened in the first place. Kanon took up the receiver of the phone fitted to the wall and dialed the extension number for the room where the servant slept. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Kanon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could it be that the lightning last night had caused a mechanical fault and broken the internal telephone lines? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Kanon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. Kanon gave up trying to wake him with the phone and dashed off to the room where the servant slept. How long had she slept until? How long had it been since she had awoken and started lazily staring up at the ceiling? That vague sense of awakening was Natsuhi's usual morning experience. Her sleep was always light, and she wouldn't even have been able to sleep at all without medicine. To Natsuhi, sleeping was definitely not a happy thing. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still last night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. While she was inside this room, no one would torment her. Her headache wouldn't get any worse than it already was. This room was her only peaceful space. So when she left, it meant returning to the world of her husband's siblings, probing each other's minds. Then, wouldn't it be better to just stay locked up in this room forever? Natsuhi smiled bitterly at this fantasy. She wasn't starting to sound like Kinzo. Sorry, she was starting to sound like Kinzo. Yeah. Even though most of the time she would call Kinzo names for staying locked up in his own room and taking no notice of anyone, the truth was that she actually longed to do so herself. Natsuhi gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. Man. You go to bed with a headache, you wake up with a headache, you have a headache throughout the whole day. Ugh, that must be exhausting. When she reached for the doorknob trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she had hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. Oh, that was so sweet. It was Maria's charm that Jessica had given Natsuhi. Kinzo is truly smart, yeah. If she remembered correctly, Jessica had said something about it having the power to repel magic, and that she should hang it from her doorknob. Maybe it was thanks to the charm that at least this room had been protected from her husband's siblings' malice. And as she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful.
ジェシカのおかげで少しはゆっくり眠れたということかしら。
Oh, that's sweet. Then Natsuhi remembered. That's right. Last night I promised Jessica that I would give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsuhi opened a drawer of her dresser and took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured ever since she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsuhi had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it looked much more effective when compared to the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion keyhole. She had heard that this mirror was a spiritual mirror to ward off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It has been believed since ancient times that strange powers dwell within mirrors. Most likely, the way they reflect light created a belief that they also deflect misfortune and malice in the same way. Natsuhi returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. That's so nice. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed throughout the room.
はい。
おはようございます、奥様。源氏でございます。早朝から申し訳ございません。
今行きます。何事ですか?
No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, and especially not directly. Maybe something bad had happened. You think? For example, maybe some fatal oversight had been made during the preparations for breakfast and the household would be put to shame in front of the guests. Or something. Natsuhi breathed out slowly, as if getting a head start on the troubles she was surely about to be told of. When she opened the door, Genji once again said a morning greeting to her while bowing deeply. Natsuhi tentatively responded.
おはようございます。何かありましたか?
申し訳ございません。昨夜の落雷で電話機器に故障が出たようです。内線電話が普通になっておりますもので、直接のお伺いになってしまったことをお許しください。
内線電話が普通? それは面倒になりましたね。修理は可能ですか?
残念ながら故障箇所がわかりません。後で業者を呼んで修理させたいと思います。
How do you call an expert if the phones... Oh wait, those are the internal ones, okay.
ということは、この台風が過ぎるまでは修理不能ということですか。つまり、客人たちの滞在中はずっと普通ということですね。客人たちのお世話に支障は。
出ないよう最善を尽くします。
結構です。粗相のないようよろしく頼みます。
Natsuhi let out a small sigh of relief. She had been prepared for the worst, but the telephone breakdown wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. But then, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Eva. Natsuhi gave her head a light shake.
朝食の準備は順調ですか?
Well, about that.
それが、ゴーダの姿が見えません。朝食の支度もまだ行われておらず。
何ですって?
Natsuhi was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time, and then come to something like this when the relatives were visiting? Natsuhi placed a hand to her forehead and shook her head sharply.
大方朝寝坊でもしているのでしょう。とにかく、誰でもいいから急いで朝食の準備を。
Okay, Natsuhi had exited into the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The unpleasant thing that she saw there silenced her completely. Oof. It was an unsettling sight, as if someone had dipped their fingers in a dark red liquid and clawed at the area around the doorknob. As though someone had soaked both of their hands in blood and groped at the door and the knob. Like someone had wanted to stage something like that and left this mark as an awful prank.
これは何のいたずらですか? 悪趣味な。
私も今ここにお伺いして初めて気づきました。後ほど清掃いたします。
大方、趣味の悪い客人の冗談でしょう。不愉快です。実に不愉快です。
Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsuhi had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. On the contrary, it would definitely be better for her to say she hadn't even noticed that such a prank had been played in the first place. Natsuhi gave the order to have it cleaned and headed off to the parlor with clacking heels. When Natsuhi and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there.
おはようございます、皆さん。
おはよう、夏日さん。朝食も合田さんが作るっちゅう話やないか。朝から胃袋が大喜びで騒ぎっぱなしなんや。
本家の楽しみは食事くらいがせいぜいですものね。
It was me.
エヴァさんも朝からご機嫌がよろしいようで何よりです。
Natsuhi returned Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive, even though it was early in the morning, with a wary expression. Then Kanon jogged in. After bowing in apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he approached Genji and told him something in a small voice.
カノン、ゴーダはまだ見つからないのですか？
申し訳ございません、奥様。お屋敷内もゲストハウスも回ったのですが、まだ。
一体どこへ行ったというのです。とりあえず今はゴーダより朝食の準備が先決です。至急対応しなさい。
はい。
Kanon glanced at Genji. It looked like he had something else to report, but needed to ask Genji whether he was the right person to say it. Genji nodded and decided to give the report himself.
奥様、ゴーダだけではありません。旦那様の姿もありません。
主人が？
はい。奥様より先に旦那様に朝食の準備がないことをご報告しようと思い、寝室をお伺いしたのですが、それから旦那様だけではありません。ルドルフ様ご夫妻とローザ様のお姿もありません。
ゲストハウスにも？屋敷にもですか？
はい。ゲストハウスの部屋にもおられません。
When she had heard that Goda alone was missing, she had thought that he might have slept in or was loafing around somewhere. But once she heard that several of the relatives were also missing, she began to start thinking a little more optimistically. Okay, how does that train of thought go? Last night's family conference might have continued all night, and in fact might still be going on. It would then be imaginable that they had wanted to cool off their heads after being in that stuffy room, and had all gone off on a group walk through the rain. The part about cooling off their heads really sounded like something Kraus would like to say. Probably Goda had been called to go with them to aid them with something. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to have understood that if he did not return, the preparations for breakfast would be hindered. So perhaps as much as he'd like to leave, the atmosphere would not permit him to, and the conference was continuing in that manner even this very moment. Yes, but Eva and Hideyoshi are here, so... How does that make sense? Yes, Natsuhi thought this to be an extremely persuasive theory. Natsuhi remembered the illusion that she had felt that morning of being sucked into a continuation of the previous night. And upon learning that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again let out a deep, wary breath. Because of the banquet of the filthy vultures circling around Kinzo's property was still continuing.
大方、庭園のどこか、あるいは海岸の方で相も変わらず遺産の話を繰り返しているのでしょう。とにかく、ゴーダを呼び戻さなくては、いつまでも朝食の準備が整いません。
ってことはなんや。兄さんたちの話し合いはまだ続いとるんか。
She had thought she'd spoken in a small voice, but Hideyoshi had overheard her and managed to grasp the situation.
兄さんもルドルフもタフね。ローザの場合は若さかしら？私たち、夕べの24時過ぎにはもう眠くてベッドに戻らせてもらったんだけど、確かにあの時点でも、まだ兄さんたちは熱論を交わしてたわ。男って、熱くなると嫌ね。
Natsuhi snorted, her face still blank.
カノン、表を探してらっしゃい。
I have no idea. It's like all of them. I don't know.
ゴーダを見つけたら、すぐに戻って朝食の準備をするよう伝えなさい。
If it was just one person, okay, but the group disappearance, I don't know.
かしこまりました。
夏日姉さん、 表とは限らないわよ。お父様の書斎ってことはないかしら？
なるほど。考えられん話やないで。どういう話の流れかはわからんが、お父さんの書斎に場所を移して、お父さんにも混じってもらって議論を続けてるっちゅう可能性は十分あるやろ。
そのような汚らわしい話題を好んで、お父様が書斎へ招き入れることなど考えられません。
あらそう。じゃあ仕方ないわね。
I think they all left for Bahamas and now are drinking those cocktails with small umbrellas in them while getting us good suntan. Do you have dreams of doing that, Zekto? Because you seem to be invoking that fantasy. I think it's the second time I see you talk about it. But yeah. I don't know. My mind is drawing a blank. It would be like the wildest speculation that I could possibly make here because I like being consistent. I appreciate that.
源氏さんとカノン君は申し訳ないけど、外を探してきてちょうだい。確かに兄さんなら、頭を冷やすために外を散歩しようなんて言い出しても不思議はないわ。たとえこんな天気でもね。私はお父様の書斎に行ってくるわ。ひょっとするとそこにいるかもしれないしね。
客人であるエヴァさんにそこまでのご足労はおかけできません。私が行ってきます。朝のご挨拶も兼ねて。
あら、じゃあお願いするわね。でも朝の挨拶を交わしてくれるかは疑わしいわね。夏日姉さんってお父様とは仲よろしかったかしら？
仲が良いかは分かりかねますが、後宮家の跡継ぎの妻を許されるだけの信頼を得ていると確信しています。
ならきっと返事くらいはしてくれるわね。お父様とは朝食くらいご一緒したいの。ぜひ降りてきてくださるよう説得してくれないかしら？私たちはすっかり嫌われちゃってるみたいだけど、そこまで信頼を得ている夏日姉さんの言うことなら聞いてくれそうですもの。そこまで短歌を切ってお父様を説得できず、一人で降りてきちゃったりしたら、信頼を得ているなんて二度と言えないかもね。
自信はありませんが、努力はします。
Natsuhi responded discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. But Eva has just as a low chance as you do. She's just being nasty. It's not like she could perform better. Eva herself was treating it like a joke, expecting that it couldn't be done. But even so, Natsuhi would lose face if she gave up, said it was impossible for her, and let Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand caused Natsuhi's tightly clenched fist to shake. Eva and Natsuhi get along so well. Yeah, amazing. They're BFFs. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
奥様、よろしければこれをお持ちください。
それは?
Genji handed Natsuhi a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study would always lock itself and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door.
でもこの鍵を使ったら、あなたも咎めを受けるのではありませんか？
親方様は深くお休みになられている時、扉を叩くくらいではお耳に届かないこともございます。それに親方様にお部屋を出ていただくよう説得するには扉越しでは難しゅうございましょう。ぜひお使いください。
Genji.
I like Genji. Until now, Natsuhi had thought of Genji as a cold servant who worked directly under Kinzo, and would never work for her. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. Haha. She wanted to communicate her feelings of thanks, but by then Genji had already turned his back on her and was walking down the corridor with Kanon. But as Natsuhi watched them go, the words that reached her from behind were sneering.
じゃあ、お父様を必ず連れてきてね。
Okay.
息子のかわいい嫁の言うことですもの。きっと聞いてくれるわよ。
She never said anything along those lines. She's just being mean. Jesus.
私たちは客人だから、ここでのんびりくつろがせてもらうわ。
予算かえば口が過ぎるで。
Thank you, Hideyoshi.
すまんが夏日姉さん、お父さんのことよろしく頼むわ。
Natsuhi left without replying at a swift pace, her heels clacking loudly with every step. Ugh. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up soon. Great scene alert! Okay, Eva is just a tsundere. She's a mean-spirited one. Very mean-spirited. Never mind, it's not that one. Okay. George, Aniki, Jessica and I were snoring loudly on the bed in the cousin's room. But Maria, who didn't join in and who had gone straight to bed the previous night, suddenly and completely opened her eyes. As she rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around, the loud snoring coming from the three cousins continued. For a while, Maria had to think about what had happened. After that, she realized that her mother was not with her and quickly got lonely. Maria left the cousin's room, trying to head to the room that had been arranged for her and her mother. Paying no heed to the three who were sleeping soundly, she made a loud slamming sound on the way out. In response, Battler mumbled and rolled over in his sleep, but it wasn't enough to wake him up. I thought that's what you meant, that the Kinzo scene would be cool. Okay, I'm bracing myself. I'm excited. After a while, Maria returned once again, opening the door with a lively bang. When she had left the room, her face had been sleepy, but after returning, she now looked discontent. After that, she climbed up on Battler's bed, which happened to be the closest, and started yelling and jumping on it like it was a trampoline. After making sure that I was awake, Maria jumped over onto George Aniki's bed and started bouncing on that too. In that manner, the three of us were all greeted with an extremely pleasant awakening.
ありがとう、マリアちゃん。起こしてくれたんだね。
Maria, morning alert! Yes.
僕たちは夕べが遅かったから寝坊しちゃったのを起こしてくれたんだね。でも、もう少しだけ起こし方を優しくしてくれると完璧だったかな。
ジョージ兄さんは本当に大人だよ。尊敬するぜ。
もうすぐ7時なんだな。ま、確かにもう起きてもいい頃だぜ。
Please don't do that. Make me yawn too. It's so weird. I'm holding it in. Fuck, I can't hold it in. It's so weird.
ローザおばさんが？部屋にいなかったの？もう起きてお屋敷の方に行っちゃったのかな。
Maria kept groaning ooh and looking unhappy. It seemed like she wasn't simply lonely because she couldn't find her mother, but actually unhappy because her mother wasn't in the place she thought she was. And this made her feel like she'd been tricked. If we could have just told her where her mother was, that might have been enough to satisfy her. But unfortunately, as long as we were here, we had no way of finding that out.
どうせ朝食に行くことになるんだし、屋敷の方に行こうぜ。
そうだな。マリア、一緒に屋敷へ行こうぜ。きっとローザおばさんもそこさ。
ママはお屋敷なら行く。
そうだね。お屋敷に行こうか。多分親たちはもう向こうに行ってるんだよ。
Maria regained her usual composure, as though her earlier temper had never happened. We got dressed, left the room, and headed for the mansion. still raining. The door to the study was once again knocked upon, but there was no answer. He was still sleeping, and she couldn't wake him. If she returned downstairs saying something like that, Eva would be very amused and triumphant. And even aside from the whole Eva issue, there was the problem that yesterday, during this once-a-year family conference, he had stayed locked up all day and had still not come out to greet the guests. No, wait. I see now that my light went yellow. There we go. Even though he was the head, and no, especially because he was the head, he couldn't fail to make an appearance. Could she convince him? Natsuhi readied herself, and using the key that she had borrowed from Genji, opened the door. Oh god. I'm stressed out. A sweet stench that seemed to eat into her brain poured from the narrow opening she had created, and though she was prepared for it, she couldn't help but grimace. Thinking that he might still be sleeping, Natsuhi entered the room quietly. When she did, Kinzo, already awake, was looking down out of the window.
お目覚めでしたか。おはようございます。
どうやって入ったのか。
Kinzo spoke with his back still facing her. His voice was not harsh but calm, and Natsuhi was slightly reassured. However, he was at least in a bad enough mood that he had ignored the sound of all that knocking even though he had been awake. Natsuhi wasn't able to break the tension.
申し訳ございませんでした。源氏さんにお願いして、書斎の鍵をお借りさせていただきました。
ほう、源氏がか。我が友がそれに足ると思ったならば、話を聞かぬわけにもいくまい。して、私に何用か。
はい、もうじき朝食の準備が整いますが、ぜひお父様にもおいでいただきたく思いまして。
朝食はここで取る。いつものように運ばせるがいい。
しかしお父様、年に一度の親族会議です。せめてお顔をお見せになってください。
下に降りて、私の死後、遺産をどのように食いちぎるのかを決める議論に加われというのか。バカらしい。そのような話は私を抜きで好きに進めるがいい。そしてそれが親族会議だというなら、私がこの部屋を出るほどの価値はない。私は忙しいのだ。構うでない。
Yeah, he's too busy screaming for Beatrice. Jeez. With his last words came the threat that any further questions would be useless. Natsuhi realized that adding any further pleas would finally bring his wrath down upon her. It would be annoying to hear Eva sarcastically say that she hadn't been able to convince him after all, but there was nothing more Natsuhi could do.
そうですか。わかりました。みんな残念がるでしょうが、そう伝えます。
Natsuhi decided to give up. Bowing silently, she made to leave the room before Kinzo's spasmodic temper could fire up. Wasn't she also supposed to ask about the others? As she did, Kinzo called out to her. Compared to the usual Kinzo, his voice was calm. This voice was calm and gentle, like it came from another person.
Natsuhi, 後ろ宮の家に嫁ぎ、もう随分になるな。
はい、後宮を名乗ることを許されてから、もう随分になります。
前の家が恋しくなることもあるか。
いいえ、嫁ぐとは成果を捨てることです。私は後宮夏日。帰る家も懐かしむ家も、すべてはこの後宮の家のみです。
It was definitely not an exaggeration. Such was the level of Natsuhi's resolve in calling herself an Ushiromiya. That was why she was so sorrowful that despite all of her effort it had been fruitless and she was not even accepted by her husband.
クラウスが女で
お前がその夫であったならいやそれは言うまい。
それはどういう意味ですか、お父様。
Natsuhi was shocked. If Kinzo's words just now had been meant literally, they would have been more than enough to make up for all she had suffered up to that point.
忘れよ。年寄りのざれ言だ。
Kinzo once again faced away from her. He had told her to forget it, but Natsuhi couldn't help feeling a warmth in her heart.
お父様、この夏日は血はつながらずともお父様の娘です。後宮家の名誉も栄光も、そしてお父様が残されたものもすべてこの夏日が必ずや守ってみせますから。
お前に片翼のわしをまとう資格はない。しかしお前の心には確かに片翼のわしが刻まれている。ならばお前は間違いなく我が血族で後宮家の栄光を引き継ぐものだ。お前の衣服にわしがないことを嘲笑う者もいよう。しかしそれに耳を貸すことはない。心にわしを持つ者だけが真の私の血族なのだ。お前を後宮家に迎えられたことを今は光栄に思っている。
Without saying anything more, Kinzo remained with his back to Natsuhi. However, Natsuhi couldn't help but feel something warm well up inside her that she hadn't felt since long ago, when she had been just a child. Natsuhi bowed silently to his back and left the room.
あら、ちょうどいいタイミングだったわね。お父様の様子はどう？あんまり遅いから様子を見に来ちゃったのよ。
When Natsuhi left the study, she saw Eva climbing the stairs, and their eyes met. Eva was smirking unpleasantly, thinking that Natsuhi had just left the room trudgingly after failing to convince Kinzo. However, the way Natsuhi was now, such frivolous laugh would not disturb her. Good job. Good girl. She was not permitted to wear the family crest on her clothing, but she was permitted to wear it in her heart. So she spoke calmly, clearly, and confidently, with the dignity of the one who would protect the glory of the Ushiromiya family.
お父様は親族会議にはおいでにならないそうです。汚らわしい議題に関心はないと仰せです。
とかなんとか言っちゃって。お父様を説得できなかったんなら素直にそう言えばいいじゃない。
哀れですね。お父様が嘆かれるお気持ちも分かろうというものです。
それはどういう意味よ。
Natsuhi did not answer. Just as Kinzo had done earlier, she showed Eva her back as she headed down the stairs. Good job. Good job. Struggling to gather what had happened, Eva could only determine that she had been made fun of, and that something had happened to quickly bolster Natsuhi's confidence. Even so, she didn't have the courage to risk Kinzo's wrath. Of course not. Unable to even knock on the door, she could only scratch at the air in front of it, cluck her tongue, and follow after Natsuhi.
それで兄さんたちはいたの？お父様に聞いたの？
引きそびれましたが、書斎の中にはいませんでした。お父様が夫たちの下船な話のために入室を許すこともありえませんから、行き先を知ることもないでしょう。下に降りて使用人たちが探してくれるのを待ちましょう。朝食は遅れますが、お茶でもいかがです？エヴァさん。
別に結構よ。
Eva couldn't hide her confusion over the complete difference in Natsuhi's demeanor. She was acting so boldly, and while Eva hated to admit it, she even had a sense of dignity about her. It seems like a small thing, recognizing someone's efforts. But the moment you feel seen, like, everything changes. Especially when you've put in a lot of effort and you feel like it was for nothing and nobody appreciates it. You don't need, like, exterior validation in terms of, like, wearing the eagle or whatever. As long as she in her heart knows that what she did was seen and appreciated, that's all she needs. That's so nice. When the two of them returned to the parlor, not only Hideyoshi but the 4 children and Nanjo as well had gathered there. Genji, who had been talking with Hideyoshi, reported the current situation when he noticed that Natsuhi had returned.
主人たちはまだ見つからないのですか？
はい。申し訳ございません。あと、熊沢が朝食の準備に入りました。もう少し時間をいただきたいとのことです。
Oh no, they're having mackerel for breakfast. Mackerel alert. The clock read a little past 8 a.m. 8 o'clock was the time that breakfast was supposed to have started. The mere fact that the host had gone over that time limit was a disgrace under normal circumstances.
今、カノンが表を探しています。それから、シャノンの姿も見えません。
シャノンまで？まったく。主人は何を従えて散歩に出かけたのですか？
How many people couldn't be found? With the number of people having grown so large, it was starting to feel truly unpleasant, as though they were the only ones being left out on something interesting. At the very least, it looked like the children, no, Maria, especially felt the same way. She was indignant, her stomach grumbling, almost as though her mother and the others had left her alone to go off and eat something delicious without her. Trying to fix her bad mood, the other children were flipping through the channels on the television, trying to find a program that might interest Maria. Nanjo was sitting on the sofa, gazing blissfully at the children while reading a book. No doubt it was a book about chess. The sound of footsteps came rushing towards them with a pitter-patter. There was only one set, so they realized before they saw the source that it was not Kraus and the rest, but probably Kanon.
奥様、失礼します。
その様子では見つけられなかったようですね。
申し訳ございません。まだ。
もう十分です。ご苦労をかけました。
She didn't know where they were, but they had to be somewhere on this island. They hadn't put anything in their mouths since last night, so their stomachs must be growling about now. They would surely saunter in any time now. Natsuhi was already dumbfounded, and she had begun to think that there was no urgent need to find them right then.
私はお客様方にお茶のご用意をしに厨房へ行きます。二人とも早朝からご苦労様でした。
Natsuhi, acting as though the release in tension had caused a new surge in her headache, left the parlor. Kanon tried to call her as she left, but Natsuhi departed swiftly.
どうした？
Oh God.
まだ何かあるのか？
はい。旦那様方のお姿を見つけることはできませんでしたが、その。
Kanon sounded evasive. He still didn't know where they were, but maybe he had found something with some relation to that. When Eva and Hideyoshi noticed this exchange of words, they came over. They had probably noticed the slightly strange way Kanon was acting.
どうしたんや、カノン君。クラウス兄さんたちは見つかったんか？
実は、バラ庭園の倉庫の様子がおかしいのです。
様子がおかしいというのはどういう意味だ？
それが、何と説明すればいいのか。
Kanon once again hesitated. He wasn't speaking anything like you'd expect from the usually fearless Kanon. Eva and Hideyoshi exchanged quizzical looks at this display.
どういうこと？倉庫の中に兄さんたちがいたんじゃないの？
いえ、中はこれから調べます。その鍵を取りに戻ったところなのですが、
ようわからんが、とにかく中を調べればいいだけの話じゃないか。その倉庫の鍵はどこにあるんや？
使用人室にあります。すぐに中を確かめましょう。
Kanon dashed off to the servant room and returned with the key. Genji left the parlor saying that he would go check, but Eva and Hideyoshi also followed. What was this something odd about the storehouse that had caused the usually fearless Kanon to hesitate? It was still pouring outside, but their curiosity over this something that Kanon couldn't talk about won out. While the children made a big fuss watching television, Kanon and the rest dashed off to the entrance. Oh man, I don't know. Do I want to know? Don't like this. The Rose Garden storehouse was a place that housed various tools used to manage the garden. It was definitely not a pretty building. Because of its appearance, it had been built hidden in a corner of the Rose Garden. Kanon, Genji, Eva, and Hideyoshi came cutting across the Rose Garden holding umbrellas. They entered a small path just off the Rose Garden, which was not used by those simply appreciating the garden, but only by those maintaining it. As they dashed further along it, the front of the storehouse came into view. It was a very old shed of a storehouse, and compared to the flawlessly perfect beauty of the Rose Garden, it was pretty seedy looking. It was easy to understand why it had been built in a hard-to-see place. Eva and Hideyoshi arrived at the storehouse long after Kanon and Genji.
カノン君たちは早いな。わしは心臓が爆発しそうや。
こんなところに倉庫なんか建ててたのね。何よそれ。
When Eva looked at where Kanon was pointing, she was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Hideyoshi also followed Kanon's finger and was likewise too shocked to speak. The entrance to the storehouse was a kind of shutter. And there, everyone there now understood why Kanon had been unable to find words that could describe what he saw. On the shutter, which was completely filthy from being exposed to wind and rain for so long, plastered on it, something that looked like a strange dark red liquid? Mucus? Or maybe it was some sticky paint? Some kind of ghastly substance had been used to draw an indescribably eerie shape. The rain had caused it to drip down in several places like fresh blood leaking from an open wound. There was no longer any point in being choosy with words. A ghastly dark red substance meant to look like blood had been used to draw some kind of figure or mark intended to suggest something ominous. 2 concentric circles were drawn there, and inside them was a design that looked like a cross. The 4 ends of the cross were widely exaggerated, and it looked like some kind of crest from somewhere around Europe. And in the cracks between these shapes, written closely packed together, were some unfamiliar characters, or possibly symbols.
なんちゅう悪趣味な落書きや。これ、あれか？悪魔の儀式とかの魔法陣いうやつとちゃうか？
With reference to this ghastly shape drawn with a deep red dripping substance, Hideyoshi's comparison was not unreasonable.
これ、いつ書かれたの？
昨日、雨が降り出す前にここに来ましたが、その時には何も書かれてませんでした。
他の方々の目に触れる前に何とかしよう。ご覧になられたらご不快になられるだろう。
そうね。ただの倉庫小屋とはいえ、こんな気持ち悪い落書きを1秒たりとも放置したくないわ。
倉庫の中に塗料もあります。応急処置でとりあえず塗り消して後日天気のいい日に改めて塗装しましょう。
Yanji remembered that he had just recently seen another piece of graffiti, and that it too had been made with a strange dark red substance of the same color as this. That must have been... That's right, he had seen it on the door to Natsuhi's room.
カノン君、さっさとこの落書きを消して戻りましょう。たとえ倉庫とはいえ、実家の落書きは本当に腹立たしいわ。
はい、すぐに済ませますので。
Aye, Kanon squatted in front of the shutter and unlocked it. He then lifted it up with all of his strength. A boisterous noise resounded, and the eerie shape drawn on the shutter began to get sucked in through the top as the shutter was raised. At least for the time being, that ominous thing disappeared from their direct gaze, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to a kids' program that they had come across, Maria was feeling much better. Battler and Jessica were making fun of the kids' program at every turn, cackling. George was enjoying the program along with Maria. Nanjo sat on the sofa by himself, passing the time by reading quietly. They heard hurried footsteps coming from the hallway. They were footsteps from a single person. Did that mean that it wasn't the group of 4 that had just left? Genji was the one who had returned. It was very rare for Genji, who considered being out of breath a violation of his servant's virtues, to be gasping for air. He had probably come dashing back from outside the mansion. His shoulders were soaking wet and he didn't have his usual smart appearance. When Genji noticed Nanjo looking at him, he gave a small silent bow and quickly approached him.
Nanjo sensei, 申し訳ございません。至急お越しください。何事ですかな?
As Genji whispered something into Nanjo's ear, Nanjo's face changed color. He stood from the sofa trying not to be noticed by the children who were still engrossed by the TV, and the 2 of them rapidly left the parlor, muffling their footsteps. Just as they were leaving the parlor, they came across Natsuhi, who was pushing a serving cart loaded with a tea set. Genji whispered something into Natsuhi's ear, and Natsuhi's face changed color, shocked. Then, leaving the serving cart where it was, the 3 of them started dashing towards the entrance. George noticed them running down the rose garden through the window.
なんだろう。源氏さんと南條先生と、あれは夏日おばさんかな。
どうしたんだよ、兄貴。
何かあったのかな。ひどい慌てようだったね。
Jessica and Maria also realized that something had happened from the fact that Eva, Hideyoshi, and Nanjo were no longer in their seats, and because the serving cart had been abandoned at the entrance of the parlor.
何か事故でもあったとか？
行ってみようぜ。俺たちだけのけ者なんて面白くねえしな。
For some reason, what Battler says sounded extremely indiscreet. But they couldn't deny that they were a little insecure and concerned after seeing the adults run off into the rain, disregarding their appearance.
行ってみようぜ。何があったか気になるぜ。
Jessica's insecure words spoke for all of them.
おい、マリア。お前も来るか？それとも、テレビを見てるか？
おお、マリアはテレビがいい。おお。
僕たちだけで行こう。マリアちゃん、すぐ戻るからね。テレビを見て待ってるんだよ。
By the time the kids went outside, they had lost sight of the adults who had left earlier. But it looked like Jessica had a pretty good idea of where they had gone from the direction they had been running. Following Jessica, they ran through the rain-soaked rose garden. It felt like the wind suddenly got stronger. The malicious sound of thunder began to ring out like it had the previous night. It felt like something eerie had surrounded the island and was trying to stop them from moving forward.
ジェシカ、この先には何があるんだ？
確か園芸道具なんかの倉庫があったはずだぜ。
そんなところに一体何があるんだろうね。
But, just as Jessica had said, a storehouse came into view in front of them. They could also see the adults there. The shutter to the storehouse was open, and several of the adults looked as though they were searching for something. For some reason, only Natsuhi was outside the storehouse, not even holding an umbrella. She was facing away from them, and it looked like she was hanging her head. The ones who had just left, Genji, Nanjo, Natsuhi, and the ones who had left before them, Kanon, Eva, and Hideyoshi, made this large gathering of people, but there was absolutely no bustle of activity. When Natsuhi realized that the children had come, a terrible expression rose to her face, and she ran at them with her arms spread wide. However, no, because of that the kids saw that scene which Natsuhi was trying to keep them away from. Inside the storehouse, with the shutter wide open, a flickering fluorescent light shone down. And over there... Jessica's piercing shriek rang out. But that was just because Jessica's scream was the loudest. The same thing spilled out of Battler and George's mouths as well. Eva, just like Natsuhi, spread her arms and with a terrible expression roared at the kids.
Georgie! みんなを連れて屋敷に帰ってください早く今すぐに
When Natsuhi had spread her arms, one might have thought that she was trying to prevent them from advancing any further. However, right now, that wasn't why Eva was spreading her arms. She was trying to hide that terrible scene from the kids. It was her mother's heart trying to protect the eyes and hearts of us children by attempting to block our view of that terrible scene by at least the width of one of her arms.
何の冗談だってんだよこりゃあよ
I had seen this kind of cheap scene all too often. In manga, TV, anime, and movies, I had seen it over and over again. This was just seeing something appear in real life that I had seen plenty of times before in some of those more sensational movies, wasn't it? Hey, Squid! Thank you so much for the resub, 45 months. Ooh. The music is, yes, it's epic. And my stomach is tiny, tiny, tiny like a peanut. That's how I feel. That alone shouldn't. Ah, but that suit, it's that old bastard's, isn't it? I get it. Then that's Uncle Kraus. And Kiryu-san and Auntie Rosa.
ダメよジェシカ入ってはダメ見てはダメお父さんお父さん
Oh my god!
死後硬直をほぼ全身に認められる多分死後6時間以上は経過しとるだろう損壊部位の状況を見る限り
Like for years, I
死
know,
後に破
right?
壊された可能性が高い
Also, Zekuto, what the heck? Why are you typing in Romanian? I'm so confused.
Yeah, めったなことは言えん私は町医者だ検視は専門外だ
Trying to show your support, okay. I'm just so
ちゅうことは何や殺しただけじゃ飽き足らずさらにこんな無体なことをしたん言うんか悪魔や悪魔の所業や
Aunt Natsuhi caught Jessica in her arms and Auntie Eva caught Georgia Aniki. So I was the only one who could approach the entrance to the storehouse. If only there had been someone here to catch me too. I wouldn't have needed to have this horrible evil scene burned into my eyes. Ah, okay, I see. I see. No, that's not it. I'm standing here not because the people who would catch me aren't here, but because the people who would catch me are right there. Just as Jessica had said, it did look like a storehouse used to keep gardening tools. A lawnmower and its replacement blades, a grass sickle and a hammer, a saw and some construction tools, piled up potted plants and bags of fertilizer, and treated just the same, the corpses of several people had been laid to rest there. No, had been thrown in there. I could tell them by their clothes. That old bastard and Kiryu-san. Uncle Kraus and Auntie Rosa. Further back, Goda-san and... There's still more of them? How many people died? Fucking hell, I can't even count them on one hand. Okay, we're going into god fucking damn it territory. Alright. I didn't know whether it had been one of these gardening tools, which, if used for something other than their intended purpose, could definitely be wielded with naked brutality, or whether some horrible tool had been brought in here specifically for this. Whatever the case, the bodies lying about here, each of them had been given an atrocious makeover. This isn't a damn makeover, this is more like their faces have been plowed. Their faces were smashed, forced into an expression that a normal person couldn't make even after death. I couldn't tell where the eyes or the nose were, but I could find the mouth because it was gaping wide, the ridges of the teeth exposed. Wow, the details, really, do we need them? But the front teeth were missing, and even the cheek that should have covered that was all torn up and exposed. Oh, God. The stylish makeup that he spent way too much time fussing over for a guy is no help at all.
Oyaji! てめえは絶対地獄行きだとは思ってたぜ。でもよ、ここまでじゃねえだろ。ここまでひでえ目に遭わされるほどの悪党じゃなかっただろうがよ。だからキリエさんもさ、こんな男と付き合うのはやめろって言ったんだ。
The first of many battler screams. Okay.
あんたまでそこまでの目に遭わされる理由は何もねえじゃねえかよ。顔がねえ。顔がねえよ。クソクソクソクソ。
バトラさん、これ以上見てはいかん。こんな姿をお父さんもお母さんもあんたに見せたいわけがない。お父さんとお母さんのためにもこれ以上見てはいかん。
死者ってのは安らかに眠る顔ってやつを拝ませてくれるんじゃねえのかよ。顔がねえんだよ。俺の親父とキリエさんの顔がねえんだよ。どういう顔して死んじまったのかそれすらもわかんねえんだよ。なんだよ俺は。親父たちのことを思い出すときはこのぐちゃぐちゃの化け物みてえな顔をいつも思い出せたのかよ。そいつは最高だぜ。クソ親父のニヤニヤとした顔を思い出さなくていいんだからよ。最高だぜ最高だぜ。でもよ、キリエさんの顔くらいはいいだろ。キリエさんは悪党じゃねえ。たまにはムカつくと思ったけどよ、ちょいとかっこいい俺の姉気分だったお人じゃねえかよ。こりゃねえよ。こんなのってねえよ。黒掃除さんなんかまだマシじゃねえか。顔面じゃなくて側面だぜ。少なくとも顔半分は残ってるじゃねえかよ。
How is that any better?
まだマシだぜまだマシだぜ。
Trying to shut out my reckless words. Jessica tried to fill her ears with the sound of her own screaming.
よすんだバタラ君。もうよすんだ兄貴兄貴。
I have one question. Where is Maria in all of this? Did she come with them? Is anyone taking care of her? Disregarding age and appearance, I fell to my knees, clinging to Aniki's waist and sobbing. It was as if I was crying on behalf of everyone there. Representing the feelings of everyone there, I screamed over and over. I just...
お父さん。
She was left with the TV, okay.
倒れているのはクラウスおじさん、ルドルフおじさん、キリエおばさんにローザおばさん、ゴーダさんで5人。
いや、6人や。
Oh God.
ここにもう一人おる。
The body that Hideyoshi was looking down on now was hidden in the shadow of a mountain of random objects, in a blind spot to George, who stood by the entrance. Should I lower the volume? is a big screaming coming. So George couldn't tell whose body it was. Therefore, George cursed himself. He cursed that part of himself that imagines the worst and is always right.
じゃあ、お父さんの足元に倒れているのは、シャノンなんだね。
ああ、シャノンちゃんや。
Or that, the complete opposite of it. George was completely silent. He shook slightly, his lower lip trembling. He wanted to run up to his beloved, screaming and crying. But before rashly running up to her, he mustered up all of his strength and asked his father.
シャノンも、クラウスおじさんたちと同じなのかな。
Hideyoshi deeply understood the meaning of those words, so he couldn't give George a quick answer. No, he thought that to George right now, that was the only possible sincere and loving response. When George had asked whether she was the same, he had meant to ask whether her corpse was the same as the others. Read the character's profile after the scene is over. Since Hideyoshi hadn't denied it, it meant that the body was just as horrible.
シャノンを見てもいいかな。
いや、あかん。
どうして？だって、もう二度とシャノンの顔を見られないんだよ。その、最後の顔、どうして見たらいけないんだよ。
お前が最後にシャノンちゃんに会ったのは昨日か。
うん。
そうか。そのシャノンちゃんは別れ際にお前にどんな顔を見せたんや。
素敵な笑顔だったよ。
After receiving the ring, she was bewildered even though her heart should have been decided, bashful, and so embarrassed to show him that face that she ran away. That expression was revived in George's mind.
そうか。ならシャノンちゃんもその笑顔をお前に残したいと願うはずや。
Hideyoshi looked down upon Shannon's body lying at his feet. Just like the other bodies, it was in such a horrible state that it would make anyone want to cover their eyes. Half of the face had been smashed off, and no more than half of her expression remained. If that remaining half, soaked red with blood, had been wiped clean, that graceful smiling face might have peeked out. Only half of it. Without thinking, Hideyoshi slapped his hand over his eyes. How cruel. If only all of it had been crushed, if they were going to crush it, then he might have been able to deceive George's heart for a while by saying that it was just someone else wearing Shannon's clothes. Yet they had left half of the face. It caused the body so much humiliation, and also made it clear that this body was none other than Shannon. How inhuman. How monstrous. There at Hideyoshi's feet, trying his best to burn the image of the remaining half of Shannon's expression into his eyes, was Kanon. Where's the happy "I'm sorry, Squid, but you unfortunately dropped in at not a happy scene." Kanon was not crying. Tears had risen to his eyes, but they did not drip down. But that didn't mean that he wasn't feeling as much sadness as everyone else. Losing Shannon, who had lived with him in the gospel house, whom he had loved as a sister, must have been just the same as losing a blood relative.
ジョージ、 シャノンちゃんはきっとありがとう言ってるぞ。お前に恥ずかしいところを見られとうなかったんや。きっとお前が耐えてくれたこと。
わかってる。わかってるよ、父さん。わかってるよ。
George leaned against the outside wall of the storehouse, sinking down powerlessly.
父さん、頼みがあるんだ。
なんや。
僕の代わりに見てほしいんだ。
Is it the ring? Is that what he's gonna ask?
シャノンは指に
Yes, I was thinking about that.
指輪をつけてるかな。
A piano restoration service. Oh, good luck, good luck. That's also very intriguing. Did you happen upon a piano that you need restored? Or did something break? But anyway, maybe you can tell us later in the Discord or something. I'm very curious.
指輪？ちょいと見てみる。
Hideyoshi crouched down. As he did, Kanon silently pointed to one of Shannon's hands.
ああ、あるで。こりゃ、ダイヤの指輪や。クズダイヤとちゃう。なかなかの値打ちもんや。
それは、どっちの手の、どの指にあるのかな。
と、左手の薬指や。そっか、シャノンちゃん、婚約しとったんか。
I don't know if this makes it better or worse. I don't know how to feel right now. Okay, Squid. We have an old family piano that belonged to my great-grandparents. Parents are paying for it to be restored and sent to me, since that was one of the few things my great-grandparents left specifically for me. Oh, that's so cool. I want to see pictures when you have them. That's so nice. I love pianos. They're my favorite instrument. Good luck, good luck, good luck. I hope things work out.
ジョージ、あなた、まさか。
エヴァ、今はそんなん関係ないで。
Of course it's Evasaka. Oh, how could you? Really? Woman? Now? Yes, please do. Please do. We want to hear Squid's piano. I would love to hear. Oh my god, just the thought of it. It's awesome. Go take care of it. Have fun. Have a nice day. Thanks for dropping by. And for the sub.
シャノンちゃんは男に将来を約束されとったんや。一生を幸せにしちゃると男に言わせたんや。それが誰かは問題とちゃうで。男にそこまで言わしめて、女の本懐やないか。
Hideyoshi understands. Oh god.
いつこの指輪をもらったんかは知らん。誰が渡したかも知らん。だが、それでも、シャノンちゃんは指輪をもらえたんや。そして、それを受け入れ、左の薬指に通したんや。指輪を送った男もきっと喜んだんとちゃうか？
To most of the people there, Hideyoshi was simply disturbed by this extraordinary situation and was blurting out strange things. But to those who really knew the truth about George and Shannon's relationship, everything he said made sense.
そっか。ありがとう、父さん。
George stood up. The traces of tears still streaked his face, but his expression had returned to its usual calm.
行こう。バトラ君、ジェシカちゃん。これ以上、僕たちがここにいると、大人の邪魔になる。
そうだな。
Jessica sniffled once and trying to say that she was alright, she showed her face to her mother, who had been holding her the whole time. When she faced George again, she once again had on her usual face, although she still couldn't recover her smile.
バトラー、しっかり。
Battler kept on crouching in front of his parents' bodies.
すまねえな。がっつり泣いたら落ち着いたぜ。親父の野郎。普段はクソクソ言ってるくせに。ちょっと死んじまったくらいでピーピー泣くんじゃねえぜって、笑ってやがら。仕方ねえだろ。親が死んだら泣くように。遺伝子すり込まれちまってったからよ。
Battler's face was still bright red from the tears, but even though it was forced, he had at least recovered enough to fake a smile.
カノン、お前もこれ以上ここにいてはいけません。子供たちを連れてお屋敷に戻っていなさい。
Natsuhi, unable to take a step into the storehouse, had been standing under the rain the whole time. Maybe she had her own way of grieving, different from Battler's. She realized that she had to take on a sense of responsibility now that her husband was dead. So she gave Kanon those orders.
はい。奥様。
Kanon rose silently and turned to face them. His face was pure white, almost as though his own heart had died along with Shannon. There was no life in his expression. If during the course of a normal day he had been instructed to do a tour of the beautiful rose garden, Kanon may have led the way for them. But now there was no distinction between Kanon and the children. They were now just kids of about the same age, with the wounds of having lost someone close to them. After seeing the children go back, Natsuhi gave orders to Genji.
ケンジ、すぐに警察に連絡しなさい。台風が通り過ぎるまでは来られないでしょうか。どうすればいいか指示を与えてくれるはずです。
わかりました。防災用の無線機がありますので、それで連絡します。
When she heard that, Natsuhi remembered. That's right. The telephones were out today, weren't they? However, since it had been assumed that there could be trouble with the phones on this isolated island, a radio had been installed. Anyway, let's contact the police and seek their instructions. Everything else can wait.
ナチョ先生、もうこの場はどうしようもありませんか。
残念ながら私には何もできませんな。
わかりました。源氏、せめて主人たちの顔を何かで覆ってやることはできませんか。このような姿を晒すことは当人にとっても屈辱的でしょうから。
はい。
Genji picked up several towels hanging inside the storehouse when Eva stopped him in a shrill voice.
ちょっとちょっと、お待ちなさいよ。ここは犯行現場なんでしょ。なら変に手を加えちゃダメよ。私たちは混乱してて現場に土足で踏み入っちゃったけど、それはきっと警察の捜査の邪魔になったわよ。
Natsuhi glared at Eva testily. Objectively speaking, Eva was right. Even so, she glared at Eva as though accusing her of refusing to do those tragic corpses, which had been humiliated even after death, the simple kindness of covering their faces. However, Eva had spoken both calmly and correctly. This horrible state was definitely not an accident. It was a crime. Someone had killed them. It was a murder case. In that case, they should be careful not to further disturb the site. They had to aid the police as much as possible so that they might hand over a clue that could be used to find the detestable culprit.
私もエヴァさんに賛成ですな。警察が来るまでここは手つかずにしておくべきです。
奥様、いかがなさいますか。
そうですね。わかりました。ここを閉ざしなさい。それから念のためここに別の施錠をするように。
別の施錠？
ええ。ここに来た時シャッターの鍵は閉じていました。 ということは、シャッターの鍵を使い、犯人が施錠したということです。
確かに通りや。じゃあここを開けた限り、犯人の指紋が残ってるんとちゃうんか。
警察に証拠として提出する価値はあるでしょうけど、カノン君が普通に持ってここを開けるのに使用しちゃったわ。多分カノン君の指紋も付着しちゃってるわよ。そしてその鍵はさっき源氏さんに手渡され、源氏さんも素手で受け取ってる。大した証拠にはなりそうにないわね。
それは不用心でした。申し訳ございません。
源氏さん、この倉庫の鍵は他にもあるんか？
いいえ、この一つだけです。
ということは、犯人はその鍵を使用人室から持ち出し、そして律儀に元の場所に戻したちゅうことになるな。
Hideyoshi's theory sounded plausible, but was actually very strange if you thought about it. Why would they go to all the trouble of returning a key they stole? No, if you think about it even more deeply, there are even some more bizarre points. Oh god, there we go into detective mode. Usually, when a criminal hides a body, they are trying to delay the point at which it will be found and use that time to escape. The actual place where the six were killed wasn't necessarily here, but they had been killed somewhere on this island, and it would be normal to think that the reason they had been carried to the storehouse was to hide the bodies and delay the discovery of the crime. But that graffiti drawn on the shutter that looked like an eerie magic circle had eloquently indicated that the corpses were hidden here. It didn't specifically say that they were here, but after 6 people had gone missing, by making such an obvious scribble and even returning the key to open it, it seemed almost as though someone had wanted the corpses to be discovered here.
とにかく、一度は犯人が開け閉めをした施錠だけでは信用できません。犯人の手からもこの場所を保護する意味で、施錠を新たにしたいと言っているのです。
いい案だと思います。私も賛成です。
Genji fished around inside the storehouse and unsealed a brand new padlock which had been inside the small box.
鍵はどうなさいますか？
私が持ちましょう。責任を持って警察に手渡します。
Natsuhi took the key to the padlock from Genji's hand. At least take it in a handkerchief or something. After that, they all exited and lowered the shutter. Because of that, the corpses were once again sealed behind that shutter, covered with that gruesome magic circle. Genji crouched down in front of the shutter to fasten the new padlock. In addition to the main lock to the shutter, there is sometimes a place where you can attach your own lock in front of it. This was one of those types. In the midst of the roar of thunder and the pouring rain, the storehouse stood there ominously. On its closed shutter was the magic circle, drawn in a creepy blood-like substance and swallowing up the bodies of 6 whole people. To Natsuhi, putting the new lock on may not have been entirely to preserve the scene for the police, but rather she might have felt like she wanted to shut that mouth for all eternity, to prevent any more victims from being swallowed by that eerie demon.
さあ、行きましょう。皆さん、南條先生。ご足労をありがとうございました。源氏は急いで警察に連絡を。
戻りましたらすぐに連絡します。
The adults left the storehouse. The ghastly magic circle drawn on the shutter, still swallowing the 6 bodies, loomed eerily, occasionally lit up by the lightning. My god. Yeah. I had not forgotten. I was just waiting for the... There we go. Now I can access it. Oh wait, they're all in red now. Fantastic. Do I read just the red ones or absolutely everyone? What do you want me to do? Has anything changed for the others? This seems the same for Nanjo as I'm scanning it. The dead. Oh, great! Now we have information on the corpse. Okay. Corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. The direct cause of death is unknown, but it seems the side of his head was smashed after his death. We start where it all begins. Cryptic. Rudolph. Corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after his death. He has the right to lament his ill fortune. Corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face seems to have been smashed after her death. She was chosen by the demon's roulette. That's all there is to it. Corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. Her face seems to have been smashed after her death. I'll be seeing her again, so I'm not lonely. Very cryptic. I don't know what this means. All of these last things refer to, or I could presume, but yeah. Okay, for Shannon, corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. It seems the side of her head was smashed after her death. Don't worry, everyone will be revived in the Golden Land. And Goda, not that I care that much about him. Corpse found inside the Rose Garden storehouse. His face seems to have been smashed after his death. How unfortunate. Apparently he was actually supposed to be on duty in the guest house. I had forgotten about that. Ironic, isn't it? All that could be heard was the sound of the rain, the voices from the kids' television program that Maria was watching, and the engrossed Maria's cackling voice. In other words, what greeted them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Maria as she rolled around laughing at the television. Not knowing how to explain to Maria that her mother, Rosa, was dead, those who returned to the room couldn't manage any more than a suffocating silence. At first, Maria returned their stares with a dubious look. But when she realized that they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the television program. The children wordlessly sat down on the sofa. Their minds were probably blank from their state of shock. Though they had all cried and mourned so much, now they just vaguely sat there, their faces expressionless. Only Kanon had returned to his usual calm expression. However, that probably didn't mean he had been able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into the emptiness. Hideyoshi, fidgeting as he remembered that horrible scene, kept muttering, "Unbelievable. That can't be something of this world. It's the work of the devil." Every once in a while, he turned these into questions and bounced them off Nanjo. But Nanjo, in a calm, doctorly manner, kept repeating that nothing could be understood by only glancing at the scene, and that until the police arrived, he wouldn't know anything. However, Nanjo only appeared calm by comparison to Hideyoshi, who could not contain his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had also received a huge shock and his face was deathly pale. Maybe it was because of their attitudes that Natsuhi tried to rise to the challenge and take control. Natsuhi was apparently unchanged from her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions.
私はお父様のところへ行ってきます。現時は急ぎ警察へ連絡を。
かしこまりました。
私も一緒させていただいていいかしら、夏日姉さん。クラウス兄さんがいなくなった以上、お父様の補佐は私の仕事だもの。その私が夏日姉さんに任せっきりで、ここでくつろいでいるわけにはいかないわ。
Natsuhi was struck speechless by Eva's aggressive actions in a situation like this. It seemed that she was claiming that with Kraus dead, the one to take responsibility should not be his wife, but herself, the next highly ranked in the family. Possibly she was not happy that Natsuhi was ignoring her and handling matters herself in this extreme situation. Of course, even Eva's mind had been blank from the shock just until now. She only returned to herself after Natsuhi started giving orders. Yeah, just take her along,
お
whatever.
好きになさるといいでしょう。
Natsuhi walked out without saying anything more. Eva followed behind her. Mere moments after they left, Kumasawa ran into the parlor. Since she wasn't the kind of person to run around, it would be normal to sense that something had happened. But since everyone had been stricken by that earlier shock, none of them took any notice of this trivial difference.
奥様
夏日姉さんならお父さんのところへ行ったで。すぐ戻ってくるやろ。どないしたんや、熊沢さん。
それが食堂に血が。
Everyone in the parlor turned to listen. Everyone thought the same thing. I hope I misheard that. Just like how any container has a limit to how much you can put in it, no one felt like they could accept any more tragedies beyond what had already happened. So they all thought it. I hope I misheard that.
なんやて？食堂？
朝食の準備に食堂に配膳に行ったら。
The first to start running was George. His harsh footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanjo to their senses, and they chased after him. Battler and the others followed. They flew into the dining hall one after another, but they didn't find any change that would have caused Kumasawa to go pale. To those who had viewed that gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was just a bit of an anticlimax. However, Kumasawa, who had followed them, pointed it out. There really were some traces of blood on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it was not very dramatic. However, if you calmly thought about it, this definitely indicated the loss of a lot of blood.
ここにも血だまりがあるよ。これは一体。
だいぶ時間が経っているように見えますな。おそらく昨べここで殺されたんだと見ていいでしょう。
そういうことになるんやろな。わしらは昨べずっと食堂で話し合いをしとった。そしてここに何者かが押し入ったに違いない。
父さんたちが打ち合わせを抜けて休んだのは何時だっけ？
昨夜の24時を少し過ぎたくらいの頃や。だからその後にと考えるんが妥当やろな。
マジかよ。勘弁してくれよ。お嬢様、しっかり。
俺はもうさっきの倉庫でこの世の地獄ってやつを拝んじまったから。
そうかよ。よかったな。私は頭がどうにかなっちまいそうだぜ。ここは食堂だぜ。私は毎日ここで食事をして、学校のことをぼやいたり、宿題のことをぼやいたり、親父に学校の成績の話をされたり、そういうところ。お嬢様、これ以上ここにいるのはよくありません。100万へ戻りましょう。
俺も同感さ。秀吉おじさん、この部屋は多分警察にとって重要な意味があると思います。俺たちが踏み荒らしちまうのはまずいんじゃないですか。
Battler proposed this in a slightly powerful voice as, together with Kanon, he grabbed the pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders. The pail and shaking Jessica's shoulders, okay.
バトラさんの言う通りですな。この部屋にこれ以上好んで居続けることはありますまい。
Nanjo spoke while looking at the pale faces all around. Even though that horrible scene in the storehouse had felt like something not of this world, at least it was in a place far from here, a place we had been able to cut ourselves off and run away from, which had helped everyone to keep on going. However, this dining hall was different. It was in the mansion's main wing, and as Jessica had said, it was supposed to be one of the more relaxing places within the mansion. It was the same place where all of the relatives had enjoyed lunch and dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of that horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we really hadn't been able to run away from the scene of that tragedy.
わしも同感や。 この部屋には犯人の痕跡が残ってるかもわからんしな。素人のわしらがかき回すべきとちゃうで。はよ出るんや。はよはよ。
Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler had said, and pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. The way we were then, looking at that blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words. Everyone raced each other out of the dining hall, almost as though the last person in the room would be trapped in there all alone. Once in the hallway, we lent a shoulder to Kumasawa, who was leaning against the wall, still trembling, and we all headed back to the parlor together. Then Genji returned.
お、源氏さん。警察に連絡はつきましたか？
それが、申し訳ございません。無線機の故障か、それ以外の理由によるものかわかりませんが。
なんや、警察に連絡がつかんのか。電話も無線もどっちもダメなんか。
申し訳ございません。月曜の朝に船が来ることになっていますので、その船の通信機を借りることができると思います。
この島には船はないんか。新島の警察署までちょっくら行ってくることはできんのか。
秀吉さん、この天気では無理だ。少なくとも台風が通り過ぎるまではどうにもなりません。
クラウス様のボートは今、修理中で島にございません。ですので、月曜の船を待つほかないかと。
そんなアホな話があるか。6人も死んだんやで。そして電話も無線も通じず、船もない。台風が過ぎて船が来るまで、つまり明日の朝までわしらは警察にも連絡できず、この島におれっちゅうことなんか。
ってことはつまり俺たちだけじゃなくおじさんたちを殺した犯人もこの島から出られず足止めってことだな。
そういうことになるね。みんなを殺した犯人はまだこの島にいる。
親父たちを殺した奴はこの島から逃げ出せずまだ潜んでやがるってことかよ。くそ見つけ出してやるぜ。警察になんか引き渡すもんか。私がこの手でやっつ先にしてやる。
You're talking all of this aloud in front of Maria? Maria had finally realized that something was odd in the parlor. Or rather, than noticing something odd, it was probably better to say that she felt unhappy and neglected since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about.
ジェシカお姉ちゃん、誰か死んじゃったの？
There it is. The way she spoke was completely calm, just as though she was talking about characters in a TV drama, as though it didn't affect her at all. Jessica probably didn't like that, as though trying to say, "Can you tell just by looking at me overwhelmed with grief?" She flared up against Maria. Oh, okay.
死んじまったぜ。みんな。
Okay, let's take it out on the kid who doesn't know anything and who we purposely left out. And who needs, like, you know, very gentle, careful, you know, a very gentle and careful approach in, you know, handling this. Yes, let's lash out at the kid.
私の親父もパトラの父さんと母さんも幸田さんもシャノンもそしてマリアの母さんも
Oh god. Needs pats. Oh lord.
よすんだジェシカちゃん。悲しいのは君だけじゃない。
マリアさん、ショックだろうが聞いてください。
Nanjo, the only one with common sense. Maria is not prepared for this. No, definitely not. This is not the way she should find out. Like,
あなたのお母さんがな。
I understand everyone's feelings are like very heightened and everyone is in shock and no one is thinking clearly, but seriously, like you see a tiny little kid who knows nothing and the first thing you do is lash out at her? Come on, Jessica, you can do better.
死んでしまいました。
ママが死んじゃった？
ああ。誰かに殺されちまった。悲しいだろうがよ。心をしっかり。
何人死んじゃった？
6人だぜ。6人だ。くそくそくそ。あんな残酷なことしやがって。ほどってもんがあるだろうがよ。人間ならよ、誰だか知らねえが犯人は人間じゃねえぜ。血の色が赤いわけがね
え。犯人は人間じゃない。鍵が選んだ生贄なだけ。
え？おい、マリア、今、なんて言った？
Maria had just said something, but since the words were so remotely separated from the flow and context of the conversation, for a second I couldn't understand them. As I was about to ask her to repeat it, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsuhi's loud voice coming from the entrance to the parlor. It looked like Aunt Natsuhi and Auntie Eva had returned from their trip to see grandfather. Maria is prepared for the situation, I'd say.
無線でも連絡できない？こんな時に使えなくて何のための防災無線ですか？
申し訳ございません。
Maria seems excited. Yeah.
毎年、保守点検はさせているはずなのですが。
ほら、光をチカチカさせるみたいな船舶信号ってあるじゃない？そういうので向こうの島に連絡することはできないのかしら？
そのような設備はございません。申し訳ございません。
Just then Kumasawa came pushing a serving cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we would be able to eat in the dining hall, Hideyoshi had ordered her to bring it to the parlor.
なぜ朝食をこちらに？
She doesn't know.
ああ、夏日さん、それは後で話す。それよりエヴァ、お父さんはどうなんや？
ご一緒でないところを見ると、このような事態になっても部屋から出ませんか？
いないわ。部屋は空っぽだったのよ。
なんやて？こんな時にどこ行ったんや？
親方様が書斎を出られたというのですか？
そうです。私も驚いています。いつの間に部屋を出たのやら。あなたたちに心当たりはないのですか？
Sound of update? I mean in the profile. Yeah, okay. We will check it. Natsuhi looked at Genji and Kanon as she said this. She probably thought that the servants permitted the one-winged eagle, who served directly under him, would know of a place he might go. However, it seemed to be the other way around. Their faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized even more than everyone else how impossible it was for him to leave his room.
僕たちにも見当がつきません。
ご存知の通り、親方様はあの書斎の中に、お休みの場所からご不浄まで全てを設けさせました。親方様があの部屋をお出になることなど、よっぽどのことがない限り考えられません。
Let's see. It's grayed out. Disappeared from his study unnoticed. Kinzo's study has everything from a bed to a toilet to a bathtub, so it is extremely rare for him to go outside. However, he does sometimes go out for a walk on a whim without telling anybody, which on several occasions has led to a huge uproar throughout the house. He usually comes back as soon as he gets hungry. Usually. Okay! Fantastic.
となると、なんや、そのよっぽどのことがあったって考えるのが自然だっちゅうことになるんか。
Totally not sus. At this point in time.
まだそうと決まったわけではありません。 とにかく気まぐれな方ですから。現状をご存知なく、お一人で散歩をされている可能性もあります。仮にそうだとしたら、一刻も早く現状をお知らせして、ご指示を仰がねばなりません。
そうね。考えたくはないけど、お父様の身に何かあったのかもしれないしね。
そのような不吉なことは考えたくもありません。
No one had seen Kinzo since the 6 horrible corpses had been found. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio wouldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. It looked like the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. But until then, no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. Something tells me he went to the Bahamas and is now drinking cocktails with those small umbrellas in them as he gets a suntan. Somehow, given the situation and his personality, that theory isn't that implausible, you know? It's not that likely either, but implausible, no. Everyone had lost their composure at the extremely sudden tragedy. Tragedy. Did I say that right? Sorry if I didn't. Yeah. A heavy silence and a sense of impatience. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. Some of them became irritated while others merely held their heads in their hands. But not one of them could explain what was occurring on this island of Rokkenjima. After that, we sat in the parlor and wordlessly chewed through the breakfast that Kumasawa-san had made. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one had any appetite. However, we realized that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken the tasteful western vegetables, ones that Goda-san had probably special ordered for the purpose of some extravagantly fancy dish, and cooked them in a Japanese style, making them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Gora-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then I couldn't even imagine it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with cooking veggies in Japanese style. Like, there's so many ways to cook veggies and they're all so hyper delicious and nutritious. So, nothing wrong with that. If I did think about it, I would be reminded of the way Gora-san had died, and the inside of my mouth would be filled with a sour taste. For the time being, everyone pretended to eat, but there was no hope of anyone making any headway into the meal. Then everyone was brought up to speed on the current situation. First off, that Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kirie-san, Auntie Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as cruelly mutilated corpses. And that despite that, we were unable to use phones or radio and still couldn't contact the police. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, grandfather, who had hoped might be able to show, might be able to show a little leadership in this kind of a situation, had disappeared at some point. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he had just been taking a casual walk by now, he should have been stomping back to whine about how hungry he was. And yet, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he had become caught up in the earlier crime. Aunt Natsuhi and Auntie Eva had said that, on their return trip from going to see Kinzo, they had called out to him on every floor looking for him, but were not able to find him. If you think about the timing of it all, it was probably best to think that he had been caught up in the crime. If the culprit had taken the trouble to move the bodies of Dad and the rest, who we figured had been killed in the dining hall, all the way to the storehouse, then maybe they had already killed the grandfather, moved his body to some strange location, and we had simply not found it yet. No one actually said it, but this theory seemed extremely convincing.
私たちはお屋敷の戸締まりを確認してきます。お父様も念入りに探さなければなりません。子供たちはこの部屋を出ないように。エヴァさんと秀吉さんは申し訳ありませんが、 ここで子供たちと一緒にいてください。南條先生もお願いいたします。
わかりました。ここでお待ちしています。
Aunt Natsuhi led the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kanon-kun, out of the parlor. All that was left was Auntie Eva, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of us children for a total of 7 people.
みんなで仲良くテレビでも見て待ってよな。しかし日曜日の午前中はろくな番組やっとらへんな。
Uncle Hideyoshi tried to stir up this gloomy atmosphere, acting cheerfully.
ろくな番組見る見る。
お、そうか。マリアちゃんはテレビ見るか。じゃ、おじさんと一緒に見ような。
Maria was the only one who played along. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was 9 really this young an age? No one else was feeling the slightest bit like joining in, and they each sank into their sofas and let their minds go blank.
兄貴、聞いていいか？
なんだい？
さっき倉庫で兄貴はシャノンちゃんの指輪の話をしたよな。あれ送ったのは兄貴か？
George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response.
よせよパトラ、少しは察しろよ。
だな、悪いことを聞いたぜ。
そうさ、僕だよ。彼女に昨べ求婚したんだ。その時指輪を渡した。明日になったらそれを好きな指にはめて返事としてくれって気ざったらしいことを言ってね。
And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon-chan's left hand.
私さ、数年前からシャドウに相談を受けてたぜ。ジョージ兄さんのことでさ。
Ooh, girl talk.
なんて言ってたのかな。
シャノンは嘘をつくのが下手だったからよ。ジョージ兄さんのことを言ってるのはすぐにバレバレでさ。自分は使用人の身分だけど親しくしてもいいのだろうかとか、男の人の好きそうなものは何かとか、どういう服を着たら喜ぶかとか、そんなことをいろいろとさ。なんつうのか、そのまあ焼けたぜ。
それが婚約指輪を渡されて、そこでおしまいかよ。
価値観は人
To be
それ
honest,
ぞ
this
れ
is
だ
the
け
thing
ど
that
よ。
hurts me the most so far. It's the only thing that actually prompted me to cry earlier. Like, it's, I don't know. I guess it's the one thing that I really truly connected to in these
男から
characters.
求婚されるってのはある意味人生の到達点なんだと思うんだよ。だからきっと昨夜のシャノンは心の底から、いや生まれてから今までの中で一番幸せだったと思うぜ。
George Aniki, without raising his head, sighed deeply. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes.
シャノンは昨べゲストハウスの当番だったらしいんだ。でもシャノンは僕と一緒にゲストハウスに帰るのを恥ずかしがってお屋敷に行ってしまった。
シャノンの気持ちを察しろよ。婚約指輪をもらえばどんなに予告されてたって普通は舞い上がっちまって頭は真っ白になっちまうぜ。気恥ずかしくて 仕方なかったんだろうよ。
それでシャノンは当番でないはずのお屋敷へ行き、事件に巻き込まれてしまった。僕があの日あの場所で指輪なんか渡さなければ、シャノンはサヨは事件に巻き込まれる。
兄貴、それだけは違うぜ。断じて違う。だからそれ以上泣くんじゃね
え。バトラー君、そっとしてあげなさい。
After those words from Auntie Eva, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually hurt him. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and quietly put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had been discussing that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Auntie Eva and sat down on the opposite sofa.
バトラー君は強いわね。もうだいぶしっかりしているように見えるわよ。
まあほら、愛の深さが傷の深さじゃないっすか。俺は別にあんなクソ親父同志の方が知ったことじゃないし、桐江さんは気の毒ですが、まあ本当の親ってわけじゃないですしね。
あら、という割にはさっきすっごく大泣きしてたわよ。
It's clear Battler liked Kiria. It's clear.
まあ育ての親に対する恩はあのくらい泣けば OK かと思いまして。
そのあたりの切り替えの速さやドライなあたりは本当にルドルフ譲りね。あの子は昔から激しく喜んだり悲しんだり怒ったりしたけれど、すぐにケロリと平静を取り戻したわ。
そんなことはないっすよ。俺だってまだまだ心のショックから立ち直れちゃいません。ただ俺がみんなと違うのは、それによってどういう感情が生み出されるかってことだと思います。
どういうこと？
I was acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica were. That wasn't because my sadness was less intense and I'd already sprung back to normal. It was because my sadness had been gradually replaced by a different emotion.
悲しいっていうよりは腹立たしいって気持ちなんすよ。どこのドイツがこんなことをしやがったのか。横っ面に一発お見舞いしてやらないことには腹。
That was what I really wanted to do. It was like I couldn't allow myself to just sit here overwhelmed with sadness and hugging.
親父たちが殺されて以降、この島は台風に包まれたままです。つまりこれだけの上等を決めてくれやがった野郎はまだこの島の中にいるってことです。
そういうことになるわね。今も暗い森のどこかに身を潜めているのかしら。
I felt like I'd had a very similar conversation with Kiria-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person who claimed to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we had talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists.
エヴァおばさん、この殺人、昨夜のベアトリーチェの手紙と何か関連があるんでしょうかね。
ああ、例の？さあ、どうかしらね。あの手紙はお父様が遺産問題に絡みたくて出した怪文書という見方で兄弟は一致したんだけれども、それと今朝の事件に関係があるかは今の段階では分かりかねるわね。
あの手紙、本当にベアトリーチェなんて魔女がマリアに渡したんすかね。
まさか。全部お父様の仕組んだ茶番でしょ。シャノンちゃんあたりに肖像画のドレスを着させてマリアちゃんを騙したんでしょ。お父様らしい手の込みすぎたいたずらだと思うけど。
昨べキリエさんとベアトリーチェは実在するんだろうかって話をしたんですけど、キリエさんも俺たち18人の中にベアトリーチェがいるだろうと言ってましたね。
そんなの当然じゃない。この島には私たちしかいないのよ。なら私たちの中の誰かがベアトリーチェを語ったに決まってるじゃない。
この島には俺たち以外はいないっすか？
当然でしょ。私たち以外の誰がここにいるっていうの？この島には私たちしかいない。18人しかいない。ならベアトリーチェを語るのも18人の中の誰かしかいないじゃない。
Kiryu-san had denied that there was a 19th person by flipping over the chessboard. Even though Auntie Eva hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion at least was the same. Except if that is the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, we were able to dismiss the matter as just someone's prank. However, if we deny the existence of a 19th person at this point, matters are not so jovial. In other words,
19人目がいないなら、親父たちを殺した犯人も18人の中にいるってことになっちまうじゃないですか。つまり今この屋敷にいる誰かが殺したってことになる。
Auntie Eva smiled meaningfully. It looked like Auntie thought that this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning.
犯人は倉庫の中に6人の遺体を運び込んだわ。でもよく倉庫の中に運び込めたわよね。あのシャッターは常に閉められていて施錠されていたそうよ。つまり倉庫内に運び込むにはシャッターの施錠を開ける必要があった。わかる？
たまたまその日シャッターが開けっぱなしになってた可能性は？
使用人たちは常に閉めていると言ってたわ。つまり鍵を使用人室から持ち出さなくては倉庫は絶対に開けられない。
鍵は使用人室の一つしかないんすかね？
源氏さんはそうだと言ってるわ。ということは犯人はそのたった一つの倉庫の鍵のありかを知っていて持ち出した。さっきカノン君が使用人室に鍵を戻すところを見たわ。壁にびっしりと鍵がかけられていて、とても素人にはどこに何がかけてあるのかわからなかった。犯人はその中から倉庫の鍵を見事選び出したのよ。しかも札も何もついていない鍵を手にしてバラ庭園裏にある倉庫の鍵だと理解した。ついでに言うと倉庫の場所すら理解していた。もっとはっきり断言するわ。犯人は使用人室の内部にも熟知している。
Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, no explanation would have been necessary. However, the one key to the storehouse was in the servant room and stored with a large group of other keys, such that a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant that the culprit was someone who was used to going in and out of the servant room and knew well where the key was. The family didn't normally go into the servant room, which meant that...
ってことは使用人の誰かが犯人。
悪いけどそれ以上はおばさんも言えないわよ。でも一つだけ教えられること。
なんすか？
犯人。犯人たちは複数で、そして十分な武装をしていたと考えられるわ。だってそうでしょ？食堂にいた兄さんたち4人を一度に襲って殺し、合計6人分の遺体をようようとバラ庭園の向こうの倉庫まで運んで悪趣味な化粧と落書きを施している。これだけのことを単独犯で行えるはずもないでしょう。
It was impossible. It might not have been if a single person spent enough time on it, but that would have taken ages. It was probably best to think that a significant number of people had been part of it.
ひゅーってことはエヴァおばさんは使用人の人たちがみんなグルだろうって言ってんすか？
静かになさいな。憶測で言っちゃ悪いわよ。それにもし本当にそうだったらどうするつもり？ 彼らは私たちを生かして返さないでしょうね。しかも兄さんたち4人をやすやすと殺した相手なのよ。今この部屋に残っていてまともに戦えそうな人間はうちの家族の3人にせいぜいバトラ君で4人ってところ。状況は昨晩と何も変わらない。つまり犯人にとって残る私たちを皆殺しにするなんて簡単なことなのよ。
I had been playing detective with Auntie Eva out of a desire to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If I could manage to skillfully penetrate the culprit's identity, I wanted to stick the evidence in their face. I had gotten it into my head that if I did that, the culprit would give up and surrender, just like in one of those detective movies. However, the culprit only surrenders there because they are in a situation where resisting would be futile. The culprits behind these incidents on the island were far from helpless, and might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people on the island. And on top of that, this island was like a giant locked room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had the full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme, and cover up their handiwork. In short, we weren't in the kind of safe atmosphere where we could entertain ourselves by playing detective. On the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits and cause them to repeat another mass murder.
あくまでも可能性の問題よ。でも私は使用人の人たちをまだ信用できないわね。それに私は使用人だけを疑ってるわけじゃないわ。さらに黒幕がいるかもしれないと思ってるわよ。
黒幕？どうしてですか？
勘よ。使用人は書いて字のごとし、誰かに使用されて手足となる存在よ。殺されたのは後宮家の親族ばかり。ならその結果で利害が発生する人間が関わるのは当然。
But this was also plain and clear. The Ushiromiya family were currently right in the middle of discussing how to distribute the inheritance if grandfather died. If this followed the formulaic plot used to... The formulaic plot used to death. Used to death. Okay. Like, overly used. Now I understand it. I don't know why for a moment I, like... got confused by that. Okay, the formulaic plot used to death by many classic mystery novels. It would definitely be a crime by someone with ties to the Ushiromiya family and who was entangled in the inheritance problem. Auntie had probably also read a few books in that genre. Her theory did have a few one-sided conclusions to it, but it was a run-of-the-mill idea that anyone would surely hit upon. Used to death. Yeah, that's why I was so confused. Like, wait, what about death? And then I realized it was... I took it literally to, like... Kinda, I was expecting it to say something that's the formulaic idea used for murders in such stories, right? But it was not the literal sense of death, it was... yeah. Any ideas about what's going on? It's getting late for Nezu. Yeah. And also my mind is completely blown. That's why I don't feel comfortable even saying anything that's going through my mind. And some of the things that were going through my mind already from the very beginning, Eva already said them. So I have nothing new to add. I would rather not spew nonsense if that is okay. I think anyone would have suspected the servants even if their logic was different. Especially the talk revolving around the key to the shutter. That was enough to make it easy to suspect strongly that one of the servants was involved in the case.
だからなぜか気に入らねんすよね。
気に入らないって？何の話？
いえいえ、こっちの話っす。
I dodged the question by joking, but I couldn't wipe out the sense of unease I felt inside me. Because the reasoning we had arrived at was altogether too simple. reasoning that anyone could arrive at. That's also one of the things that I was thinking. And I just couldn't accept that. If I tried flipping over the chessboard like I had learned from Kirie-san, that was exactly why it was impossible for the servants to be the culprits, because it's like the most logical conclusion that you would draw just from the things that you have at your disposal right now. So that's definitely not it. If the servants really had been the culprits, they wouldn't have hidden the bodies in a place that was tied to themselves. Certainly not the Rose Garden storehouse of all places, whose key they themselves controlled. The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. I love Eva when she's in her analytical mindset. Her tone is just insufferable as always, but with the credentials to back it up. Actually, I feel like it's a lot more digestible. But yeah, I agree. That would create a danger for exposure. If we were to assume that they were the culprits, they had no reason to carry the bodies into the storehouse. Did they expect us to think that and so put them in the storehouse deliberately? No, that definitely didn't make sense. When the police come and inspect the site, all kinds of things will probably become clear. No matter how deeply careful the culprits were in carrying out murder, some kind of traces will definitely be found. So in summary, they have everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way and look at the game from the culprit side, it feels like there's no point in advertising the location of the corpses. If the bodies were found, a report would be sent to the police. The remaining people would become more cautious. They could start looking for who was responsible. Anyway, none of these things would make the culprits feel any more comfortable. Just like... the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Higurashi no Naku Koro ni. There we go. A mystery story has 4 parts: introduction, development, turn, and conclusion. And so, to commit the perfect crime, it is essential to eliminate the introduction. Right now, no one knew where grandfather was. We didn't know whether he had already become a victim or if he was one of the culprits. Name dropping their own game, yes. Totally not self-promotion. No. But I mean, that's fair because it's their own, so they can reference it. If they were to reference something completely different, I don't know how that would work in terms of like copyright and stuff. So they're referencing their own stuff. It's fine. But it is cute to think about it, that novel exists in the world of this novel as a work of fiction. But this to them is reality, let's say, you know, to the characters. Yep. So, we didn't know whether he had already become a victim or if he was one of the culprits, but this state of confusion had to be beneficial to whoever did this. By blatantly advertising the bodies to us and declaring, hey, there's a murder case going on, the culprit had absolutely nothing to gain. Right, that was where we could flip over the chessboard. So this blatant advertisement of the bodies was itself the culprit's goal. So it may well be that to the culprit having the 6 corpses be present there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted to display these murders. To who? To us. It was a message. The culprit was trying to shove something in our faces. I didn't know what that could be. At the current time, none of us could grasp anything from this vulgar mass murder except malice. Malice towards everyone, perhaps. Each one of the survivors had some kind of connection to one of the 6 who had been killed. This is exactly another thing that I was thinking. So see, there's no reason for me to say it. We should just read the novel. Case closed. Uncle Krause's death brought sorrow to Jessica's family. The deaths of Dad and Kirie brought sorrow to me, while Auntie Rosa's death brought sorrow to Maria. Goda-san's death probably dealt a shock to his fellow servants, and Shannon-chan's death brought grief to George Aniki, who had proposed to her, and to Kanon-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island had received an equal amount of sadness. Auntie Eva had claimed that the servants were definitely in cahoots, but then how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shannon-chan? People are upset about murder. Wow, yeah. And by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi. This is another thing that I was thinking, that the only family that is intact is theirs. But again, this is too on the nose, it's too obvious to point out. Just like the theory with the servant. Everything that's too obvious, my instinct would be to just discard it because it's too obvious. But then, what if there's this like, you know, double whammy thing kind of happening, that they want you to think it's too obvious, so it's hiding in the open somehow. I don't know. I'm getting a headache just thinking about it. I don't want to. Poor Gora is a mere shock. I'm sorry, I couldn't care less about it. I mean, okay, murder, if anyway. Give me a sec. No murder is a small thing, but in terms of character connection, he's the one that I can't be bothered to care too much about. I just can't. Sorry. I didn't like him. And he's just a character in a novel, so I get the privilege to say I don't really care about him. We can move on. Right. It was very possible to doubt Auntie Eva herself, who was acting like she was outside the net of suspicion, and who might have been trying to point that suspicion at the servants. Yes, of course. In the first place, she had managed to avoid suspicion and place it on the servants with that argument about the key to the shutter. But if you looked at it from a perspective of motive, about who would gain something from the murders, Auntie Eva's name floated to the top of the list. I feel that way about most of the characters in this. Okay. That's alright. Like I mentioned earlier, the only connection I personally felt so far was to Shannon and George's situation. That's the one thing that actually hit at my heartstrings. Kirie is also a shock for me in a way, because I really did not expect it. But the whole situation in itself is just way beyond anything that I might have expected. But other than that, I don't particularly have a connection to the other characters. Yeah.
バトラ君が何を考えてるか、おばさんわかるわよ。
Auntie knows what you're thinking. There she goes. Without Goda, the characters would be having macro for the rest of their short life. I mean, it's not really that bad. There's worse things. Macro is good.
What? やだな。内緒にしててくださいよ。あんなことやこんなことで頭をいっぱいにしてたなんて。
私がこの殺人で一番得をする。どうせ疑われるだろうから先に自己申告しておくわ。
I mean, yes and no, because if Jessica's alive, isn't she the one who will inherit everything anyway? Or like she's gonna be the next head of the family, whatever? I had tried to dodge this conversation by joking around, but it looked like it hadn't worked.
遺産は兄弟の数で分割する。でも今や4兄弟は私一人。後ろ宮家の全財産は全て私のものになるの。
秀吉おじさんが聞いたら予算か言えばシャレにならんっていうところっすね。
I love how he tries to replicate Hideyoshi's accent. That's cute.
ごめんね。どう取り繕ったってどうせ疑われるだろうからふざけただけよ。だからこの殺人は私の立場から見れば私を疑わせるためのものではないかと思ってるの。
Yeah, like both, like not both. A lot of the theories that could, you know, bubble up to the surface right now could be taken both ways. It's like we would say in Romanian, a blade with two edges. It it can be that, or it can be that other thing. And to me, that just like causes me headaches and like prevents me from actually enjoying the story and what the characters are saying. So that's why I'm kind of refraining from intervening. I don't know if you are interested in what I'm thinking, or if I should think aloud more. You let me know, but I don't know. I personally don't feel like I have that much wisdom to impart in this situation. Without, I had read that already. Okay, it's fine. So.
困ったことに、昨べのアリバイは弱いわ。
聞かせてもらってもいいっすか？昨べのことを。
バトラ君たちも知っている通り、兄弟が遺産をどう食いちぎり合うかという話し合いは深夜まで続いたわ。
Yeah, but do you realize how I feel and in what position I am when you guys already know everything? And you're wondering, oh, Nezu, the less knowledgeable of all of us who had just had all of this thrust upon her, what do you think? And I'm like not that eager to let my brain be picked or examined right now because I feel very small. And this is all a lot. Yeah.
でも何時まで続いたかは知らない。私と主人は朝が早かったからね。もう眠くて24時を過ぎたあたりで抜けさせてもらったの。
Okay, one thing that feels a little bit suspicious to me right now, okay, if you want to pick my brain. But I don't know if it's consequential or not, because again, it could go both ways. Is that why would Eva, no matter how tired she was, on purpose take herself out of the conversation of what's gonna happen to the inheritance when she has a very high interest in it as well? So if the conversation would continue among the other three, why would she purposely take herself out? A question that's come into my mind. I don't know. Eva is sus. Everyone is. I can't trust anyone.
そしてゲストハウスに戻って休んだわ。
Ah, you played as completely brained. Oh, don't be so mean to yourself though. It's fun to see someone actually make theories and think, okay. Okay, I will try to say a bit more. Yeah.
それを、
yeah.
秀吉おじさん以外の誰かに証明できるっすか？
I read it without thinking. Okay, okay. I don't get that privilege, I guess, since I'm streaming it. You all did it in the privacy of your own homes and in your own minds.
いやいや、別にエヴァおばさんを疑ってるわけじゃないっすよ。
I mean, from that point of view of like, where were you last night? Everyone was like around the place in close proximity. Like anyone could argue that they had either a weak alibi or be like, oh, but I was with this other person who can vouch for me. That kind of applies to it. I don't feel like this is any, again, it doesn't feel that consequential to me.
あら、どうだか。証明になるかわからないけれど、ゲストハウスに戻ってきた時、源氏さんに出迎えを受けてタオルはいるかと聞かれたわ。だから私たちがゲストハウスに戻ってきた時間は24時過ぎだと証明してくれると思うわよ。もっとも、私の仮説通り、使用人たちもグルなのだとしたら、こんなのアリバイにならないけどね。
Prepared for them here? Like, why would they deliberately go outside to face the weather and the storm or whatever, have Genji give them towels and be all, you know, downpoured on before going to bed, instead of just taking the easier route of going to a room that was already prepared, that didn't entail them going through the storm? Like, why? Again, why would you forfeit the ability to be included in this conversation about inheritance, then go face the storm, and just because you were tired. If I am tired, if I can't keep my eyes open, I don't want to go through a storm. I don't know.
確かにそうっすね。ってことは、俺、今、真犯人と推理ごっこをしてるってことになるんすか？
Also, Eva is just so loud and annoying that, again, it would be too obvious and on the nose for it to be her.
でも私の名誉のために言わせてもらうけど、遺産目当てだったならこんな変な殺人はしないわよ。だって遺産相続権を喪失させるだけならどんな死に方だって構わない。
That is also a good point.
むしろ自己死に見せかけた方がスマートでしょ。
Yeah.
使用人たちを抱き込んで周到に計画していたならなおさらそうするでしょうよ。
確かに、そうっすね。営利で人を殺すなら、それは常に殺人に見せるべきではない。
そういうことよ。だからおばさんは今からとてもブルーな気持ちなわけ。警察には黒幕扱いされて散々調べられるでしょうね。やだやだ。
Auntie Eva shrugged with a bitter smile. Just like it was easy to think of the servants as suspicious, it was also very easy to think of Auntie Eva as suspicious. So if we flip over the chessboard, then that means it was impossible for the culprit to be the easily doubtable Auntie Eva. However, if that logic could pass so easily, then motive wouldn't count for anything. No, that can't be right. I know, right? Knowing the motive should be a big clue towards knowing the culprit. That is why murderers throughout history have tried to ensure their motive will not be found out, by skillfully complicating the incidents. I don't know. Every time I flip over the chessboard, it keeps flipping from front to back and back to front. Exactly. Were my thoughts closing in on the truth? Or what? Why is the screen black? What's happening? Okay. So the scene is ended and it's 11:40 for me, so I think it's a good place to save. Aye. Maybe we can chat a little bit. Curtain rise on tragedy. Curtain rise on tragedy, yeah. Wait, here, title. Yes. Yeah, thanks for being here as always. It's always fun to have you guys around. Right. And this time I can do this. Hey. There we go. I can move it to the start of the screen so I can face it directly. Yeah. Quite something. Like, obviously I was expecting someone to die eventually. I was already clued in that this would be that kind of story by Bea sending me all of that material to study. Big blue Natsuhi. I went blue today. By sending me all of that material to study before about mystery stories. And I was like, okay, it's gonna be one of those. Cool, fine. I was expecting it to have some sort of echo or connection to the epitaph of Riddle, whatever, under Bea's no, I mean not our Bea, under Beatrice's, okay. I want to say Beatrice to like kind of differentiate under her portrait. But I was not expecting it to be this sudden, and I was definitely not in a million years expecting it to be 6 people at once. I was like, okay, that's too much. And Ushiromiya Nezi. And I mean, the first time that they were like disclosing what had happened, it felt like a bad joke. Like, is it really them, or is it like set up to look like them? Especially when it started describing how they didn't have faces. I was like, okay. But then I don't know what to say about the half faces. I really don't know. I don't remember the full epitaph because so I cannot immediately make a connection. I would have to reread it. I cannot connect it to which part of it. It looked like it might be. I felt like while doing the previous streams, I could connect some of the events with some of the stuff there, but I wasn't sure, and I was like, I'm not gonna stress about it. Just let it unfold. And then suddenly we're here, and I'm like, okay, that's a lot to take in at once. The dead are sus. Everyone is sus, okay? Maybe the least one is Battler, simply from the perspective of, like, it seems he's gonna be our main character. So if we take on one of the rules that you sent me, Bear, the detective cannot be the culprit, because that's one of the rules. So that's the only thing that would possibly fully exonerate someone in the story. The Battler is also sus. Okay. Yeah. You know, it definitely was Maria. Maria, with her 9-year-old body, she definitely murdered everyone brutally and carried... Oh, yeah, and this is another thing that I was thinking. It wasn't mentioned yet, but maybe, I don't know if it just... They haven't discovered everything, or there's, like, you know, more detail to be given or whatever. There was a bloody scene in the house. There was incredibly bloody inside the shed, but there was nothing in between connecting that. Like, how do you move a bloody body like that there, and there's nothing left in between? I don't know. I don't know. It was magically transported there. But yeah, either we don't have the details fully, or the story just doesn't want to unveil that just yet, just to keep the mystery up, or whatever. But that doesn't, so far, it doesn't look... Chief Garden Card might work for that. Okay. But then you use whatever instrument you did to do this, which, again, as was mentioned, and I was also thinking it, 6 people, that's a formidable task for anyone. Not just one person, even 2, 3 people, it's still a formidable task to move them. And you have to use some tools or whatever. You don't leave a mark, or you either clean the mark, and you hide the instruments. They're not immediately visible or in plain sight or easily found by the characters that are investigating it. But then you close the shed, and then you put the basically screaming thing on it, like, hey, something happened here. So how does that connect? Where is it? I don't know. It just feels like so far it feels like a really, really bad prank in many ways. Yeah, that's basically where I am in my thoughts, as someone who was completely taken by surprise by everything that I read tonight. I don't know if that's anything interesting or entertaining to hear. Again, I am in a bit of a weird position, because you guys know and I don't. So yeah, I can only work with what I have so far, and also my memory is not the best at retaining absolutely every single detail. And again, I was taken aback by this, because I was expecting someone to die, but I didn't expect 6 people to die at once. That's why when it was like, fuck, they're missing in a group. Or like, what does that even mean? Like, it means that some of them are dead, and some of the others are connected to plotting it somehow, or like some could be there, some could be that, some could be missing, and it's looking suspicious right now, but then it's gonna have an explanation, and they're gonna come back or whatever. But no, just everyone is dead. Okay. Yeah, sure. I wouldn't have thought of that when you asked me. In terms of expecting brutal murders, I was expecting murders, but this was quite another level, like going all the way, because it in some ways, it, like, seeing it being executed like this immediately just made it like not be about the inheritance anymore, because all of the reasons that that Eva mentioned, but also, why go to this extent if what you're after is the money. This kind of brutality is indicative of something else. It's not just the money. Yeah, but anyway, like that's just, you know, the feelings that I get right now. Haven't had any chance to put you know, an order to my thoughts because I've been reading and been trying to absorb stuff. There was a magic circle too. Yeah, like what's up with that? Again, I have to check the reference material that you sent me, Bear, because I did look at it, but there were so many symbols there that I couldn't possibly. I was like, you told me to look at the pictures. I looked at them. I didn't memorize what each of them meant. Maybe the specific thing that was there has a certain meaning, but I don't remember which one it is, or if it even is among the things that you sent me. But yeah, I'll you know, allow things to kind of settle down in my mind, sleep it off, read some of those things during the weekend, and we'll see where I am on Tuesday and what further progress happens in the story. But from now on, I'm just bracing, okay? Suddenly today, a third of the cast was killed. Killed, if that's actually what it is. Because I still have question marks there. In a way. Time to stop and study demonology. My streamer? What do you mean? What did I mean to say? I meant to say something. I'm tired. It's easy to lose my train of thought. Yeah, so yeah, the fact that like a third of the cast just whoop. Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if after next stream we would have like 3 characters left. Like, okay, great. Or something. I don't know. From now I'm bracing. I'm braced for anything. I'm not gonna be surprised anymore. I'm like, oh, I'm sure. This happened. Let's go. All right. Yeah, that was quite a lot for one night. Thanks again for joining me. I'm gonna go rest and try not to think of brutal murders anymore. At least like for 20 minutes before going to bed. I appreciate your lovely presence in my chat. You're always fun to hang out with, and so let's do it again next Tuesday. Until then, I wish you a nice end to your week. Relax, enjoy, do all of the good healthy stuff for your body and your mind. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Take care. Night night.